Hey guys, welcome. In case you're new here, my name is Mira. I am an amateur artist and this summer I'm working on improving my art skills. Last week I spent a week learning about values. This week I'll continue these, focusing on how light interacts with form, creating shadow. I'll strengthen my understanding of light and drawing skills through a myriad of different drawing exercises, and I encourage you to grab your sketchbook and draw along. You can focus on light and shadow as well, or choose any other art fundamental, or just draw along for fun. Let's go to day 1. I started this week's studies with watching videos on YouTube to gain new knowledge on this week's topic, light and shadow. After learning how light interacts with form, taking notes of everything relevant, and with a couple studies from photo references under my belt, I started with a simple illuminated sphere, following one of Broco's videos. From there I scurried around the house to find some simple objects to make a very makeshift light studio under my desk. Using a flashlight, I can now control the light and shadow areas and play around with the source of light. A camera can't capture details in both the light and dark areas, which is called dynamic range, so this exercise works a lot better if you practice from real life. Drawing while holding the flashlight and switching between looking up and under my desk was far from ideal, so I quickly fastened the light behind the desk and this solved one of my problems. However, this also made the light less strong, so after this tapered cylinder, I made a new setup, sitting myself on the ground, attaching the torch to my tripod, and with a makeshift clipboard, I finished today's studies like this. These are the ones that I got to do today. I think it's really great practice. I'll get a little bit more into the theory of these shadows later, but these are the ones that I got done today. I just want to clarify, I am not here to teach you how light works. This video is not a tutorial because I am not qualified for teaching other people, so I won't go into detail of everything I'm learning, but I do recommend all of the videos I used for this week's practice, and they will all be in the video description. I think there's at least one thing to take away from every video to improve your art, and they're just overall very insightful videos. Since this is practically a draw with me this week video, these are some of the Hatsune Miku sketches that I made as well today. I drew them for my figure. It's 37 degrees today and I just can't take it anymore, so we're gonna continue to day 2. Today started with, you guessed it, more research. I also made a couple portraits following the same process as yesterday with the spheres and other 3D objects. I started with a linear sketch, then I determined the terminator, which is where the light and shadow areas meet, or rather where the light can't reach anymore. Then you form the half tones in the shadow area, determine the core shadow by observing the reflected light, and adding the occlusion shadow as well. This makes the whole drawing a lot more dynamic in terms of shading. Since it was still so hot today and I had another appointment as well, I didn't actually get as much drawing in compared to the other days, so this was actually all I managed to do, plus these Ayanami Ray sketches. Following the research I did today from this Love Life drawing video, I learned and observed that the cast shadow's edges get more blurry the further away the caster of the shadow is, and as I stand underneath this tree, you can see that my cast shadow is sharper than that of the leaves of the tree. My body is closer to the ground than the trees, and because the leaves are farther away from this cast shadow, the edges become blurry. If you want to know exactly why this is, you should watch the video. Once again, it'll be in the description and in the iCard. I just thought this was so interesting, and I will definitely focus more on how light interacts with the world around me when I go outside, but it also works while you're walking around the house. Observing like this just really helps to understand the world around you better. With the extreme heat finally subsiding, today was a lot better. I've mostly done observational drawings both from life in the train and on the streets. Back at home, I started on more portrait drawings, this time digitally. I looked up some monochrome portraits on Pinterest and started with a linear lay-in. From there, I first blacked out everything that was in shadow, keeping these shadows in one big dark shape. Because of the dynamic range, they would lose detail. Then I blocked in the halftones, which are areas where the light source was directly hitting but less strong because they were at a stronger angle. Then I gradually got rid of the initial sketch, making sure that they stayed legible from a distance instead of getting caught up in all of the details. Even with these simple studies, it's clear that I'm much more familiar with drawing female portraits compared to male portraits, but I'll continue to do my best. I'm quite happy with how they all turned out. Oh, and also I'm using a dark blue simply because black and white is getting very boring and I just really like color. Just like last week, I'm still only focusing on values, but this time I'm bringing in minimal shading and soft shadows in the light areas. Looking at these finished studies, they keep reminding me of those posterized posters with like world leaders on them. And in a way, they follow the same principles of 3 or 4 values, so it's not that weird they look alike. These exercises were working well for me, so I continued on another simple still life drawing. As with all of the others, I focused where the lights and the shadows were, portraying the form to the best of my ability with a dark midtone and white values. Especially the grapes were quite intimidating at first, but with merging similar values together, getting rid of the lines, they still turned out well. For today's studies, this video of Cynic's design was really helpful. I would lie if I said that I'm not at least a little bit lost with this week's studies and exercises, so today I started with a couple more observational drawings in my sketchbook, just something that I'm used to. They don't follow my study subject of this week that well, but they are great for warming up my hands and observational skills. And throughout this whole week, I've been sure to do some simple sketches in my sketchbooks to make sure I don't get too caught up in only these boring studies and I keep having fun. For today's studies, I watched this video from Marco Bucci and it was a godsend, a bible for anyone who wants to learn how to paint digitally. It was all about soft, hard and lost edges, and I took this theory to draw a ball, and then after my ball I was full of confidence again and decided, yes, a portrait is great, let's draw a portrait. I don't know why I keep doing this. But yeah, it obviously didn't turn out that great. Especially when I don't have a linear sketch, I find it very hard to keep the proportions in check. And this painting is another clear example of that fact. After being slammed in the face and told I really need to calm down, I made some paintings of simpler subjects, mostly fruits. All the while, I really kept the hard, soft and lost edges in mind, deciding where I want the focal point to be and where I want the human brain to just kind of fill in the blurry parts. Since hard edges scream for attention, I use them sparingly, mostly working with soft edges. From today on, I also switched to Clip Studio paints instead of Paint Tool SAI, because Clip Studio just has way better textured brushes for painting. These quick paintings were so much fun to do and I would highly recommend doing them. I feel like I've really made a jump in my painting knowledge. For the simple ones, I am very happy with the results. They all look very edible, even the spoon, even the cup. Look how shiny. I'll let you guys in on a little secret. My hubris got too high again. I felt so talented and amazing and I jumped into another portrait once more, this time in color. I was not ready for this obviously, but my ego came crashing down quite quickly. Capturing color is still such a big step from just using values, and we'll say this one was just for fun. On day 5, I watched one of Mark Brunet's videos where he gives 3 exercises to improve your shading. The first one is simply redrawing a bunch of shapes again from reference, taking notes of the light source and the shadow areas. I've done plenty of these the past week, but they never get old. And the reference park Mark provided was immensely helpful, and it would have been awesome if I had used that from the start. I'll be sure to link it below if anyone is interested. I'm still not very good at even these simple studies, and I can't expect to shade complex forms like portraits or clothes if I can't even do these simple shapes, so I'll just keep on practicing these. But I do definitely see myself improving, so that's really nice. As always, improvement takes a lot of deliberate practice and time. After 5 of these simple studies, I went to the next exercise, which was about creating soft edges from hard edges. I'm pretty sure you were only supposed to soften the edges of one shape, but eventually I just went all out and blended pretty much everything. This process is really just color picking in between and blending the color, picking and softly blending, picking, just do that over and over again. For this I'm primarily using the gouache brush in Clip Studio Paints, and this brush has honestly quickly become one of my favorites. I just really love the texture that it has, as well as its blending properties. After 20 minutes, the original photo had been blended into oblivion, and that concludes day 5. This week we'll have 6 drawing days instead of 5 like last week, because I didn't draw that much because of the heat and other responsibilities, but this is the last day. This morning I continued where I left off yesterday with the next exercise being adding bumps and cuts and different shapes to an already existing object. So I chose this cone and I added some bumps and cuts. This is honestly a lot harder than it looks because you really need to keep the light source in mind and just think about how the light shapes the form. At certain times my brain just broke and I had to try a couple shadows and lights to see what looked good, and then after I determined this looks good, from there I could determine why it looked good and why it looked correct. Next up, I took another one of the references and added more shapes into the scene, following the same lighting pattern as the other shapes and doing my best to make them appear like they're part of the original reference. This also really racked my brain, but it was certainly another great exercise, once again, to just understand how light interacts with form. Once the table was all filled up, I was done and moved on. For this one, I took a ball with planes, then first determined the light source and then decided what the shadow planes would look like, taking the Lambert's emissions law theory that I learned earlier today from a video of Dorian Eaton. This was not as hard as I had expected, honestly, and with that, this week's studies have finally gotten to an end. This week was a continuation of last week's values. Nonetheless, I feel like I also learned a lot this week. The way light interacts with form and just how to shade better. Improving my paintings by implementing hard, soft and lost edges to best convey how you want to tell your story. And lots of observational drawings because these are never a bad idea. And there were lots of those this week as well. This week I drew mostly digitally, but I did start with traditional sketches as well. I think it's always a good idea to switch things up a little bit. Since I want to get proficient in both, I gotta practice both. But they're also two completely different tools, so some things worked a lot better digitally and others worked a lot better traditionally, especially if you had to work with pressure sensitivity of your pencil and everything. I have done so many monochrome sketches, drawings and paintings, and I'm itching to get into colors. But it's not quite time for that yet. I'll let my mood decide what I'll tackle next week and we'll just take it slowly. I hope you got something out of this video. I encourage everyone to go on an art improvement journey this summer or whenever you're watching this. The word study always sounds so boring and not fun, but I think studying art is just so much fun. It's so fun to learn new things, to learn how the world around you works. And light is honestly just responsible for everything because without light there is no form, there is no shadow, there is nothing. And it blows my mind. I had a lot of fun. I hope you had fun watching this video as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you did some art studies as well, be sure to tell me what you drew in the comments. For now, I will see you next week. Bye bye and happy sketching.